Fungus IT, the podcast all about anxiety, depression, and recently, bipolar disorder. Hello, my name's Elaine. I have Bipolar 2 Disorder, the sequel no one asked for. It is such an honor to be here and to be bipolar. What a time. It's the greatest honor I have. Super fun. Would I recommend it? Live your best life. You can give it a whirl if you want. Not my favorite. Kind of like there with the Red Roof Inn. Not the best, but working through it and knowing how to work with it makes it a lot better. And so I know some of you are very new to the bipolar world. I might be the first person you've quote unquote met that has bipolar disorder. And so I would love to talk about some of my experiences with my new mental health fund. Just so you can kind of have an idea of what it's like. And I thought today I could talk about what it's like to be manic. So just to set a baseline, when you're bipolar 2, you are having hypomanic phases with your depressive episodes. Hypomanic is different than manic. Manic episodes last longer, and they can lead to some more destructive behaviors. Hypomanic lasts a shorter amount of time, only a handful of days, and it can actually be a springboard to then hype into manic. It's really fun. Love that. But with bipolar 2, you have hypomania. Now, for me personally, and for a lot of people, it's hard to get diagnosed with bipolar. In fact, I believe bipolar is one of the harder ones to diagnose because the symptoms can totally just look like anxiety and depression. But, if you just become aware of it, it's hard to go back and be like, oh, well, was I manic? Did that last for longer than a week? Because a lot of times your memory gets a little foggy when you're manic the same way it does when you're depressed. And that's just because your brain is going wee-haw, and it doesn't want to, it's hard to form memories. This is just a fun thing with a lot of mental health disorders, actually. They call it brain fog. And I'd love to do an episode about that in the future. But mostly you have that, you forget. And so it's technically now that I'm monitoring it, I haven't had a manic episode. But if I look back and think about it, there might have been times I did. And if you have a manic episode, that usually bumps you up to bipolar 1. So anyway, that's why I keep saying, as far as we know, it's bipolar 2. I also was on a medication that heightened my symptoms and triggered them. So I've had a very interesting experience ever since I learned I was bipolar. I can look back on my life and I see little incidents that have happened, and I was like, oh, that might explain that. But for me, and for the rest of this episode, I'm just going to refer to it as manic instead of the difference between hypomanic and manic, just for ease of speaking shit stuff. Me, words, great, haha. Manic at the disco. Okay, nope. I'm still working on my bipolar puns. Don't worry. I have a list. I am working on it. I'm workshopping some this weekend, and I'll report back with better material. But I was diagnosed in 2019, and so I went through 2020 kind of having this viewpoint for the first time. And so what I first wanted to do, and I'm going to link these episodes in the description, I just did a quick look through and thought of episodes where I think I was manic, or they unknowingly were talking about my bipolar disorder. Some of them I knew I was bipolar at that point, and it was my way of getting to talk about what I was going through, but y'all didn't know. So for example, why I didn't settle on my medication. I talk about my medication change and how it's going to be better, but if you listen back to it and you know now that the whole reason this all started is because I got a completely different diagnosis than I thought I was going to get. I was kind of hoping I'm just still anxious. We need to change the meds. No, girl, new one. You can listen back to that. It's a very, interesting episode. Obviously for me, it's always been that, but hearing it back now and me kind of dancing around the subject, it's just fun. Similar with how to come out with a mental health disorder. That was me coming to terms with the fact that I did not want to tell people yet, and that it was okay. And I thought maybe other people needed to hear that as well. But for me also, it was just me reminding myself, it's okay if I am not ready to tell the world I'm bipolar. And to be honest, it's okay if I had never wanted to say it. It's one thing to accept it yourself and do your own personal thing, but you have the right to tell people in this entire universe what you want to of yourself. So those are two examples of like recent episodes I did that were definitely me talking about my bipolar without really saying it. So, mystery. Other podcast incidents where I might have been manic. In April of 2020, I had just come off the high of ShePodcasts Live, okay? And that's when this podcast game really upped it for me. I started taking myself seriously. I learned that there are other podcasters in the universe I can actually talk to and meet. And I got the guts to be like, hey, it'd be fun to have some guests on, mostly because a lot of people recommended that. And I had interviewing experience from my days on the newspaper. Hey, got your copy today. I don't know, guys. I'm tired today. So I figured, hey, I can do this. I need to do this. Let's do it. And so I think around April, things just started falling into place. I had a couple of people reach out to ask me to be on their podcast. And I was like, okay, this is scary, but I'm going to do that. And I kind of kept riding the high of that. And then if you look at April of 2020, you're going to see that I had a lot of guests that month. And I'm really glad I had all of them on. They were really amazing people. I had Dr. Shana, I had Dr. Kelleher, I had Crystal. Like, they were really awesome conversations. But I will tell you that I couldn't stop myself from scheduling them. And I made myself do it. Like I couldn't stop myself. I was like, yes, I have to have all of these guests. And okay, I guess we're doing it back to back. And yes, of course I have to release it one after the other. I need to provide them the material. I have to have everything really organized. Like, what if I don't? I have to make sure I have all these questions ready. And so I booked them all when I was manic. And then I fell off of that. I kind of resettled into my normal mood. And then it was like, oh, nope. I took on more than I should have in a single month, and I did not set good boundaries. No one would have cared if I said, hey, like, this is how it works. Sometimes you record an episode and it comes out 2 months later. It's just how it is. I did not do that. I felt the urge that I had to do everything immediately, and I was very anxious. So I went from feeling very empowered and like, yes, we're going to set this up, and this up, to instantly being like, why? Oh God, this is overwhelming. So that's a great example. But this episode's turned out really well. You probably can't even tell I'm in an anxiety high, but I just remember that entire month was just so stressful. And then, yeah, even going farther back, I have an episode called My ShePodcasts Live 2019 Experience. That was in October. That was before I had my psychiatrist appointment like 2 weeks later, where it was like, oh, you're bipolar. So when you go to a conference like that and you're around a bunch of creatives and you're in a good environment and people are telling you information you never knew and there's so many ideas you can play off of, you're gonna probably feel a surge of energy. So that's normal. You then want to try to do everything. I feel like a lot of people do get that post-conference high and then they kind of fall down. But for me, it kind of escalated. So I talk about how I'm so energized after the conference that I kept staying up really late to fold my laundry because I had so much energy. I didn't know what to do with it. I talked about how 2019 just wasn't my year and how I was just feeling very anxious just constantly. Oops. So those are what I think are great examples, if you want to go back and listen to those, of me being manic but not knowing it. And just a quick clarification, you can't like go listen to people and then if they're excited or something or talking fast, you can't just be like, oh, you're bipolar. We don't do armchair diagnosing here. And there are going to be instances where I might show some of these symptoms, but I'm not necessarily manic, which leads me to the next topic, actually, I wanted to get to. It's hard to know if you're happy and excited or if you're showing manic symptoms. That's like the new question in my life. So this is going to vary from person to person, okay? So just because these are my symptoms doesn't mean it's going to match up with somebody else's. And you might also think like, hey, some of these are like things I've experienced. And again, I'm not armchair diagnosing you. I don't know. But also just know that with the reason it's a mental health disorder is because it takes that baseline and then just takes it a step further. Like it keeps going. It's the difference between being stressed, being anxious, and then having an anxiety disorder. It won't stay within like a realm of like, oh, like chemically it makes sense here. And then it's like, oh, you're all over the place. So those are just my warnings before I get into this. But this is how I get Manic the musical. Ooh, Elaine's gonna work on it. Okay. So the first thing I do is I talk very fast, and I'm actually talking incredibly fast right now on this episode. I'm having a good day. I think that's why. I haven't had caffeine. I actually woke up early. I got a lot of very stressful things done. So I think I'm just happy as opposed to gross manic. But that is something I do when I get manic. I talk so fast. A lot of people have that symptom too. You're just able to compile all the words in your head because your brain is working at superhuman speed and things just click and you're able to go. Like I can probably unlock it now, actually. You ready? I'm going to tell you a story about Fern today. So it's really weird. So Fern like was totally walking through the meadow and it was really gross and there was a ton of goose shit because all the geese have come back and I'm like, ew, go back to Canada geese. Like, why are they called Canada geese and not Canadian geese? Like, I think we all do that. Anyway, so we're walking through and there's all this poop on the ground and it's so big. It's like the size of cigars. And I've never smoked a cigar, but like a shit that's the size of a cigar coming out of a goose's anus is insane. Anyway, we're walking through. I probably have a ton of shit, goose shit on my soles of the flip-flops. Why am I wearing flip-flops through a goose shit meadow? I don't know. But I am. And my dog keeps going around and eating it like candy. And I'm like, first off, Fern, you're not allowed to smoke cigars. Why do you think you can have goose shit cigars anyway? So that is how I would normally talk and I would just be fine and people would be like, what the fuck are you saying? I'm out of breath now, but with the superhuman energy, I could keep going. As I go through these symptoms, I want you to remember this isn't just 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. This lasts 4 days and that wears on you. So yeah, talking very fast. And something I actually tried to do when I realized that was a symptom I was having is when my brother was younger, he actually went through speech therapy. And one thing he learned is that every time he talked, he would take his thumb and one of his fingers and he'd tap it together. So you start with the pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, and pinky. And you just tap each time you say a word. And that tends to help me slow down. When I'm buzzing, though, it feels very anxious to slow down. I'm like, no, I have to go 1,000,000 miles per hour. But that helps me calm down. In fact, doing that actually like unearthed a hyper energy that I just need to, let's all take a deep breath. Okay. So along with talking very fast, that means my brain is cranking shit out. And y'all, I get 1,000,000 ideas when I'm manic and they're all amazing. They're all fantastic. And I have to work on all of them right that very second. Because if I don't, it might go away. And also it's so great. And I'm capable of doing all that because I can do it. I believe in myself. People tell me to believe in myself. And they tell me that I'm creative and I have good ideas. And here they are, a bushel of them, a bouquet. So what am I going to do? I am going to stay up really late working on it because I have my day job and I'm plowing away at the day job. I'm getting stuff done. I have enough time now to take notes at work. And so I have an extra tab open where I'm working on these ideas. I get home and I'm bouncing between each idea because for 5 minutes, I'll be really going hard on this one idea and I hit a block and we don't deal with the block because I'm feeling great. So I'm like, oh, well, let me go to the other project I thought of. And some of the things might be I start something or I commit to it with someone else. And at the time, I have the superhuman energy. I can do it. But when you try to juggle all of that, at some point, you don't get anything done, or you've just created a very stressful schedule and like a full plate for yourself when not superhuman could deal with that. And when you fall out of the manic, you're like, oh, I'm not superhuman. But yeah, I have so many ideas and I commit to a lot of things I might not be able to follow through on. Again, the interviews are slated for April. That's a really great example of me signing up for a lot of things that I think are great at the time. But when the time comes, it's so exhausting for me. And I forget how much that stuff drains me. And I think the hardest thing, and I'm actually going to get into this later, but the hardest thing with manic is that it's just the complete opposite of being depressed. And for me at the time, I was just going between depressed and manic. I wasn't even having like stable days, like maybe one or two, but I was just like poo poo. So to go from depression when you don't have ideas and you feel like a slug to suddenly being the cheetah who's brilliant and working on everything, like it's fun and you want to lean into it. So when logic reminds me, oh, in the past, this has bitten me in the ass, I'm like, but I finally feel good. Like I finally feel good. And that's why I ended up putting all this shit on myself. Another thing I did is I started drinking a ton of caffeine. And the caffeine's purpose was to keep the high going. So if I was having a great day, I drank as much caffeine as possible. I didn't know this was the reason why, but I drank as much caffeine as possible so that I could feel even more superhuman. I mean, I would reach a point where my vision kind of started having speckles in front of it. And my brain, I could like feel my brain. And obviously a ton of caffeine makes you talk even faster. And a lot of people get that little brain perk anyway. And so I already have the brain perk. And I'm like, well, hell, I could put the icing on this cake right now and keep going, which can then really crash into anxiety. So that's the dark side. When I'm very manic, I shake a lot. So like my legs shaking, I'm wringing my hands. I pace a lot. I cannot physically stop vibrating. Like my whole body is just a little bouncing ball of energy waiting to just shoot out. And so sitting through conferences, sitting through meetings when I felt this way was hard. I wasn't able to pay attention. I was shaking. Again, I was having a million other ideas. I was not present. I was like, okay, this is great. Like, I'm ready. Like, I've got like 5 funny things to say to this person. I'm going to swing by here. I'm going to network here. It was just a lot. So I couldn't like actually stay still. I stopped drinking coffee. This is actually, I don't know if I said this yet. The reason I stopped drinking coffee is because it was pushing my manic, and I was on a medication and I was going to have to possibly get into a much heavier medication with a lot more side effects. And so I just tried to cut out a lot of shit. And so the reason I stopped drinking coffee is because I didn't want to go on lithium. And there's nothing wrong with going on lithium. It is the thing that helps bipolar the best. I think there are a lot of negative connotations with lithium. I think it's gotten a bad rap in the media. I think that's the one where people are like, oh my God, you're on lithium. You're gonna like end up in an asylum and you are gonna be like catatonic. And it's not true. So I just want to clarify that. But for me, it could have been anything else. It was just I was on a really solid medication that didn't have a ton of side effects. It was the first time in my entire medication journey where I was on meds that didn't cause extreme weight gain. It didn't give me like night sweats and like all these really annoying and just like ever present symptoms. I didn't have it with that medication. And so I wanted to try to do my best personally to see if I could do better with actually managing what I could on my own. And if it didn't work, then I was going to go on lithium, and that would be what it would be. And I would be okay with that because at the end of the day, I just want to be a functioning human being. But I kind of had a trash lifestyle and I was like, I want to clean that up and just see if that makes it better. And it did. So again, there is no shame being on lithium or any medication if that is what works for you. I personally wanted to try to see if I could just be healthier and avoid doing another medication change because they're kind of annoying. At some point in my life, I might have to go on lithium. Our body chemicals change as we age, right? So no shaming on anyone's medication ever. You got to do what you got to do, right? And if that's what the doctor says works and you feel it, you go with it. So for me, I cut out caffeine. And that helped because when I was manic, I just chugged that fucker a lot. And caffeine made me anxious, just hands down. But I thought anxious meant I might get to feel superhuman. So even though I knew it made me feel like shit, I thought if I drank the coffee and I felt like shit, there was a chance though that we could jump over that hurdle into awesomeness. Didn't always happen that way. So with the manic, again, I've been feeling all of the things I just told you for a couple of days. And then I got a little exhausted and one thing could go wrong. And I can't stop my brain from moving 1,000,000 miles per hour. I'm feeling superhuman. I've caffeine buzzed myself to the extreme. And so with my brain coming up with 1,000,000 ideas, it starts to jump to a million conclusions. So let's say someone sends a text and they didn't add an exclamation point, or there's something that could be interpreted, but normally you're like, oh, I don't know, but like you can let it go and move on with your day. Oh, that would just destroy my day. Like little things would just enter the panic vortex and everything would suck into it. And again, I'm at that huge level of energy. So you've just struck a match in a room of gasoline. Like everything was explosive, and then I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't even try to take a breather or go for a walk or try to sit still and do a meditation because my body physically was like, we can't fucking do this and we can't stop. And so I was still in overdrive, but now we were in overdrive of a vehicle I did not want to be in. I did not want to be in the anxiety, chaos, whatever. I reached a point where sometimes I couldn't stop myself from talking. I could tell I was annoying people, and I could not physically stop. There would be urges like I'd have to go do something if I had an idea. It wasn't like oh yeah, I can do this. It was like I have to. So a great example is my office was having a Thanksgiving party and everyone had signed up to bring in something. I had signed up for something easy like brownies. And then the night before, this idea hit me. What if I made face cookies of everyone in my department? That's a fun idea. Maybe I could table that and do it later is what I would normally do now. But in my head, I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. And so I go to the store, I buy the ingredients, and it is fun. Don't get me wrong. That was really fun to do. And we all have pictures of it to this day. But I spent 6 hours doing that. I did that for my entire evening, and I was going to stay up as late as it took to get it done. And I couldn't let the idea go. So that's how my manic works. It just like latches onto something, and because I'm amazing, I have to do it. And I think I also feel like it's this little gas tank. We have a lot of gasoline happening here. Love it. My fuel tank. I have it and I need to use it as much as possible because I know I'm going to be depressed soon. And I didn't quite understand or connect the dots because I didn't know that's how bipolar worked, but hit the manic, you can hit the depressive usually right after the manic. And I knew that I kept having these like 3 days on, 3 days off. And so I tried to get basically a week or 2 weeks worth of shit done during my manic because I knew I was going to be awfully depressed in the next 3 days, which putting that pressure on yourself when you feel that energy, it just keeps making it better and better, as in worse and worse. So those are my experiences with being manic. And so everything I just told you would normally, in a full manic episode, probably last a week plus. Okay, that's not good. I was going back and forth on 3 to 4 days last year when I upped the medication that made everything worse. And that alone was exhausting. And it would sometimes go back and forth. Some days it'd be the bad, anxious day. The next day it'd be amazing. I had no idea. I actually remember in 2019, I used to wake up and I'd pause and be like, what kind of days are going to be like? Did I wake up anxious? Did I wake up depressed? Some days I woke up feeling great and those were the best days. But I literally would wake up and pause and be like, okay, what is it? Oh, okay, it's that kind of day. Which it's so wild to think about this now that I know what it was. Not a fun time. I don't know. It's bringing up some things now that I'm talking about it. I kind of forgot how chaotic that time was because I feel so much better now, guys. Getting on the right medication changes everything. Interestingly enough, there were some positives to the manic phase. This is a weird thing for people with bipolar, is that you kind of like the manic. It's not good. It does not last. Overall, it's detrimental, but there are some lovely things that make you still want to lean into it. Kind of like if you want to work out, right? And you want to like get to this certain level of fitness or you want to feel this level of good or whatever. And you know, you shouldn't eat only a bag of sugar for every meal. Like you can have it in different forms, but if that's your goal, you don't eat the whole bag of sugar. I'm all about this though, but like, you know, that's your goal there. But you can't resist, and so you do it sometimes, right? And you lean into it. So that's kind of my relationship with manic. It's like, I know this isn't good for me, but damn, is it not the sweetest sugar on earth? So the reasons why I liked my manic phases, and to this day, if I feel like it's bubbling up, I'm like, oh, this is good though. It's because I'm really witty. I'm really socially on point. When I'm manic, I don't feel awkward. What a lovely feeling for someone who's anxious. You get the superpower to not feel that anymore. There's an excellent episode of Modern Love. It's an Amazon Prime show. And there is an episode actually about bipolar, and Anne Hathaway plays the main character. And she talks about the manic versus the depressive. And the manic phases, she's wearing really colorful clothes. And they actually start having musical moments. Like she's walking in the grocery store and everything is falling into place. Like she's walking down this aisle and a grocery cart is just suddenly like pushed into view and she grabs onto it as she keeps walking. That's what it felt like. Like it felt like everything was lining up perfectly and it was beautiful. My ideas were really good. Again, I'd feel depressed and it was like, oh, thank God I finally have energy. This is great. I love this feeling. Again, sometimes when I wasn't the super anxious, I was able to let go of a lot of things. It was like, I don't care. I don't care about money. I'm going to live in the now. I want that experience. So I'm going to spend the money and I'm going to get lunch every single day this week. I am going to get that Nintendo Switch. I will indeed get that plane ticket to Japan because we live in the now. Oh, and, spontaneity, it's one thing. Energized is another thing. Being dumb and young with money, sure. But like that manic makes it even worse. But it feels so good to just let go. And then, yeah, sometimes you can feel superhuman. Like I can do anything. I tended to not feel like I was like all that in a bag of chips, but I would kind of feel like, hey, like I can do anything. Like, fuck it. You want me to join your cornhole tournament? I will say yes without even thinking about how much I hate doing cornhole. All of those kind of things. So overall, it's a very complicated feeling because on the surface, it feels good and people are like, oh, hey, like you're really in a good mood. Like it's so fun to be around you. So people enjoy it as well. And so if everyone around you loves it and they're feeling it, you want to hold on to it, especially if you're so used to getting depressed. Like, can you imagine? You don't just go back to normal. You get to make up for the bad days. I used to think like, oh, good. Okay, I can forget I was depressed and like plow forward with this. And so my final thought on all of this is going to be that question, am I happy and excited or am I manic? Because it's hard. And my recent thing this past year has been trying to figure out, am I like a normal happy? Because for a whole 2 years plus, who knows, I thought happy was what manic is, and it's not the same. It's hard. Like I'm excited right now. I'm excited that I'm recording this early. I'm working on another project. Things seem to be lining up for me. Or do I just think that because I'm manic and that's the view I have? There was a stretch where I was up late, but was I up late because I just have a shit schedule and I tend to be a night owl anyway? Or was I manic? And it's hard. And I think I might have been hypomanic, but it's hard for me now to not get in my head about, like I get so in my head about it and I question everything. This has just been an ongoing thing for me with all of the mental health diagnoses I've had. I don't know what feeling to trust in myself. I don't know what is me being anxious versus me being stressed. Am I just sad? Am I depressed? Am I just tired? Or am I depressed? I have to live my life differently when I'm manic. I have to put up a lot more blinders. And I can definitely talk about that in the next episode, like how I try to manage my manic symptoms. But I have to approach it differently. But if I am just happy and it's okay to feel that level of good, is that okay? I don't know. So that's something I'm still figuring out. Manic is a weird thing. And again, every person has their own experience with it. Some people can get into really harmful situations because of it. Other people, it's way more intense. It might be less, but it's a weird thing. Ugh, I'm still trying to figure it out. So I don't know. I hope that was intriguing to you. I'm not a specialist. I always like to emphasize that. I'm not a specialist. Those were just my personal experiences. I highly recommend Googling some of this if you're very interested in learning more about the specifics. And again, if you've ever felt those things, I am not saying that you're automatically bipolar. If you're ever not sure, go to a doctor, go to a psychiatrist, and they will happily talk to you. Sometimes these symptoms overlap with something else. That's the fun with mental health. They're Venn diagrams sometimes, not just their own circles. Thank you so much for listening to this episode about being manic. This is a topic I'm very interested in because I am still going through it. So if there's anything I said today that you're curious about or you would like me to share more of my experience about, let me know. This is a really fun new topic. and I am excited to get to share this part of me. If you like this podcast and you want even more like content, you want video, you want access to blogs, you should check out my Patreon, patreon.com/AngusIT. I have 3 deers and 3 tiers. I have 3 deers. I ship them to you and we go frolic in the woods. That's tier 1. I have 3 tiers, $1, $2, and $5. You can check them out. I've got it linked below. And because of that, it is time for me to give my first lovies shout out to the patrons that have joined. Oh, you lovely darlings. We have Katie and OT from the For Your Reference podcast, my pod biffles. I love you forever and always. Thank you for being a patron. I've got my friend Laura Rashley, poet extraordinaire, editor of The Life, not even the month, The Life. Thank you so much. Taylor from Who Knows Podcast, a fellow mental health podcaster. Go check her out. Thank you. And Rachel, oh my goodness, you're the best. Thank you for joining. 1,000 love yous to you. Is that aggressive? I'm sorry, Rachel. No, I'm not taking it back. I love you too. And Vanessa of Fabled, the amazing creepy cozy folklore podcast. I love my pod people. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vanessa. So those are the patron levy shout outs. If you become a patron, you can join that levy section, and I give you a shout out on all of my socials along with the benefits of each tier. With that, I hope that you are able to have a calm moment after that episode. Like, you can take a breath, maybe meditate and drink some tea. The hyperness was so much. So take a moment, relax, and enjoy what you're in. And I will talk to you next Wednesday. Bye, Heifers.